Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome back to another PorscheCooled podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things Porsche. Today, we're joined again by Steve and his GT3.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Steve's
Is that how it
coming.
goes? Yeah.
It is. Steve's coming all the way from Sydney, Australia again. If you've watched or listened, I should say, any of these podcasts, you would know that already. Steve's from Australia. He has a 997.1 GT3, white, very, very beautiful car. Have you been for a drive this week, Steve?
I did. I went out yesterday, and it's nice and sunny in Sydney, and I hope to kind of go and do the same today. I should be working, but I'm not going to, so, well, for now.
Where did you go?
I just went and visited John at Pro Stitch, picked up my little RS-style door pulls, which I had covered in Alcantara, and the centre lid console, which he embossed with the logo for me as well. I'll take some pickies for you, and you can have a look.
Okay, cool. So these are the parts. Yeah, but these are the parts. So these are the parts that you were going to get done in the UK, but decided to get them done in Sydney, right?
Yeah, not because of anything apart from I'm too stupid to work out how to send them to the UK without avoiding all the kind of horrible VAT duty on the way in. And because Australia's so far, it's so expensive in terms of all the shipping costs. So
yeah,
I had a bad experience because I was going to get Gary at FX to kind of help me with the inserts, and I just sort of discovered from the bad way, the stupid way, exactly how difficult it is to kind of send stuff across. Which sounds weird in this modern kind of world, but it wasn't easy. And I think COVID also makes it a lot takes a lot longer to kind of send something. So
yeah, that is a problem. And I have to admit, I got an email from the guy here in the UK. So apparently my leather parts, I'm still not sure how many or what he's actually made because he hasn't told me. Hopefully not everything I asked for, because I actually cancelled a couple of things.
Oops.
So hopefully it's not everything. So I don't know what's going on. But he said he'll have it finished by end of the week, ready to be sent out. But just to... so everyone, all the listeners know where I am. I'm actually back in London. I flew from Bahrain at 2:00 this morning, Bahrain time, and I flew back to London. And actually, it was pretty good. It was actually not that bad. Flying felt really weird though, Steve. It felt very, very weird after all this time. And you know I fly a lot, and it was strange. I mean, I know I think it's been 6 months since I've been in a plane, but that's a long time for me. So it felt kind of weird.
Bit nerve-wracking, or?
No, it's just odd. It's just like, I don't know. Like, I actually felt a bit nervous before we left Bahrain. I actually felt a bit nervous about actually flying, and a bit like I wasn't really on top of things, I don't think. I think that was the problem. I wasn't really on top of what was going on. So, but when we got to the airport, everything was fine. Very, very quiet. Bahrain airport is only a small airport until the new one opens, so it was very quiet. Not really many people flying. Our flight was quite empty. As I said to you earlier, I got there really, really early. You were told to get there really, really early, and it was a waste of time. We didn't need to get there that early, so we're just waiting around a lot. And then UK, you have to now, in Australia, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks. In UK, you have to also quarantine, but self-isolate for 2 weeks. So we're supposed to stay in the flat, in the apartment here, and not go out, only if it's for essentials such as food or medicine. So we ordered food in. We actually got groceries delivered, so that's all sorted. But yeah, it's a bit weird. Is it
mandatory to wear a mask in the UK?
It's not mandatory, but I tell you what, because I'm used to wearing it in Bahrain, and in Bahrain it is mandatory and you get fined if you don't wear them. I wore them. We wore it back from the airport. I went back down. I had to go down to the concierge here in our building to pick up some parcels, and I wear it. And I tell you what, no one else is wearing a mask. In fact, you feel like people are looking at you like, "Are you sick?" Because you've got a mask on it. I kind of felt like that.
It's disconcerting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
I don't know if you've kept up with it, but in Melbourne, there's a sort of outbreak again. It's getting quite bad. I live in Sydney. So they've just cottoned on to the fact that, well, they've made wearing masks mandatory in Melbourne, which I sort of think that they should have done that all along. Even if it's because you're protecting other people, that's exactly a good reason to do it. I don't reckon it'll be too far long before Sydney or New South Wales does the same thing, but see what happens.
I saw before we left Bahrain, I saw the anti-mask protests in UK. There was some protests going on about it. Honestly, I really don't see what the big deal is. To me, it's like it's not a big deal. Maybe that's because in Bahrain, like I said, everyone's wearing it and it's just like the norm. So you kind of, I guess when I first started wearing it, it was a bit weird, but now because it's been going on for months, it's not a big deal. I wouldn't be one of those people, I tell you now, that waste my time saying I'm going to be anti-mask and I'm not wearing one. I would just wear it. I don't see what the big deal is, but that's another discussion, I guess. But what I was getting onto, so I'm in London, like I said, you know that. London's great. It's very green. It's not dirt and sand. It's not, all the buildings aren't beige like in Bahrain. It's nice to see some green. It's nice to see the Thames. I mean, it's very pleasant. The air's nice. Bahrain was just getting way, way too hot. But anyway, so what I was getting onto, so I'm going to get those parts, those leather parts, I'm going to get them delivered here instead. Just in case there's something wrong with them and just to save some money with the shipping.
It's exciting.
It is. I hope he just has
put them on your desk and take lots of photos and
not
quite the same as installing it, but
yeah, I actually asked him to take some photos for me before he sends it to me, but I don't have an invoice or anything yet. I'm still in the same situation I was weeks ago, so I'm still waiting. But at least he's been working on
photos.
Yeah. I mean, these craftsmen always take a long time. You just have to get used to it, I guess.
Yep.
All right. So you've driven your GT3. I haven't driven anything except the old beaten up Audi in Bahrain. It's very boring. I keep seeing people buying new Porsches online, which is really depressing. I get very envious. But anyway.
So you might be buying a beat up Q7 as your second car to go alongside your 997?
No. I've been watching, I'm still obsessed with Bring a Trailer. I know it's in the US and I know whatever, but it's interesting to see these auctions and what things go for. Like some of these auctions, some of these cars are just going for crazy. You know, I was going to get into this later, but there's an old BMW M3 on there at the moment, like an 88 model. And
the original one.
It's a lot of money. It's a 1988. I think it's about to finish, actually. I think it might be finishing in a day. So it's well-progressed auction. But it's a 1988 M3. It's at $124,000 US dollars.
That's crazy.
And it's got 8,000 miles, which is nothing. So it's 8,000 mile, 1988 BMW M3. It's got 28 minutes to run, actually, because I'm looking at it now, and it's 124,000. I don't know. That shocked me, that one. I thought that was way too much. But
I suppose it's the mileage, isn't it? You're not really going to drive that car a hell of a lot unless you're Ferriston and Zuckerman.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's when I saw it. It looked like one of his cars. I thought maybe he's selling his car, but it wasn't. Anyway, let's get onto that later. So, Steve, what's the topic today? What are we talking about?
I would try to segue you just then, mate. It was. See, I'm getting good at this.
The mic's in your hand. What are we talking about?
We're talking about. I think I made the suggestion just because in the last podcast you mentioned our second car, and I know you kind of you've been talking about your next car quite a lot, and you've kind of bounced anywhere from an SUV in Bahrain to a 912 for, I'm assuming that's another Sydney car.
Sydney car, yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting enough thing to kind of talk about in terms of pretend you've got your 997 and it's a keeper, which I believe it sounds like it is for you. It definitely is for me. What car would you put alongside it in the garage?
So we're going to call this podcast the best car to go alongside a 997 in your garage. Correct?
Sure about that? You just said that.
See, I think I confuse people, right? because I know I talk about a lot of cars, and I guess I just talk about what's in my head. And unfortunately, my head at the moment is pretty messed up. Like there's a lot of things in there, a lot of vehicles in there driving around, which, you know, and I have to say to you, the 912, and I know you weren't a fan of the 912 when I first told it to you, but the 912 is one on my list only because one, I think it's a really good investment. Two, a comparable 911 of the same year, of that same generation, is 3 times as much, 2 to 3 times as much, value-wise. Yep. There seems to be a lot more 912s coming up on the market. There seems to be a lot of people. I mean, since I even started talking about 912s, I think there's 4 on car sales in Australia. I mean, I think 2 are modified. Right. That beige one, the sand beige one, is still for sale, which I still really, really like. But I think there's 4 for sale now. Another black one turned up the other day. But I just watched the prices, right? I just watched the market. And I guess it's like, I remember a story you told me years ago about Ferrari, how you went to some function. I think it was, you went to some school or something in Wallara, and everyone had Ferraris and they were talking about Ferraris. Do you remember that story?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And they were all into investing in Ferraris.
308 GTS or something. I don't know enough about Ferraris. And I was mixing with a crowd that I don't normally mix with, and they were talking about Ferraris and the values of things. I suppose it's like anything, watches, stock, whatever.
But that's when they weren't that expensive. You know what I mean? That was when the Ferraris weren't that expensive. And I guess you need to watch the market. I guess car market is like share market, right? You have to like have an intuition or have to know when you want to buy. But I can see already like a 912 that was for sale on Bring a Trailer, a burgundy one. And if anyone's listening and watched that auction, it sold for $48,000 US, right? It had patina. It was slightly lowered. I think it's a seller. I think the seller's name's Wob or WOB, who sells quite a few good cars, like a lot of. I think he sold a few 912s before, but it hit 48,000. Like they're already in the high 40s, and if you look at the history of the prices, I think they're around 35, and now they're hitting high 40s. And these aren't mint cars. These are cars with patina. These are cars with chips. These are cars that have a good interior and a solid engine, but they're getting up in price. So I'm watching them, but, and I think I've said this before, if you buy one from the US, one, you're going to have a left-hand drive car in Australia. It's going to be on heritage plates, right? To get it into Australia at a decent price, you really have to spend no more than 35,000 US, because no doubt you're going to have to do stuff to it, and then you get, GST and et cetera onto it. So I think 35,000 US works out to be about 70,000 Australian. And then you could do some work on it yourself. You know what I mean? But I've talked about
record,
this.
I'm not. I just don't know enough about them. I don't really follow sort of that vintage or that era of Porsches. So I have no real understanding of it. Like to me, they look amazing. They definitely look really cool. I've got no idea about the driving experience. My uncle, who I've mentioned before, has quite a few old cars in his sort of backyard. He's got like a Bmw 200 Ti and a different one. He's got like old Beetles and Minis and stuff like that. And he loves them, absolutely loves them. But I think the driving experience was obviously very different. And the only thing I worry about with that type of thing as a second car would be the amount of money that you have to plunge into it. I think about the amount of money I plunged into a 964 and a 993, and at the time they weren't that old, but I think depending on how particular you are about the thing and how often you drive it, etc., my worry would be with something like that. And this is purely speculative because I have absolutely no understanding of it, is that could be just like a massive money pit.
Yeah, you're probably right. So that's on my list.
Like if you had like so you budgeted, I don't know what, like 120 grand, like all in terms of literally buying a car, doing some work on it, and maybe like a year's worth of maintenance in that first year of ownership. If I had 120 grand to spend, wonder what. I'm not sure I'd spend 120 on that.
Well, that's the thing, and that's what Natasha says as well. She'd rather have something nicer to drive in. and I've shown her some of the videos of the 912, and it looks a little bit not so, I don't know, comfortable, I guess. I mean, it's an old car. I mean, I've driven old cars. You know, I've driven old Minis and I've driven all these old cars, you know, many years ago in high school. So, you know, friends had all these sort of old cars, old Escorts and old Minis and things like that, old Holdens. So I know what they like to drive. They're not great. I mean, Porsche is still, I think, at the pinnacle of that, of the generation. Like 70s Porsches are obviously better than a 70s Australian-made Holden car. You know what I mean? So it's still a better car. But I think, you know, that is always something in the back of your mind. Like, what else can you get for around the same price? So if you end up spending 120,000, you know, and this is why I always talk about all these different cars, because it's hard. If you're just normal people like us, and you can have two cars, it's not easy to pick two cars, as you know, because there's so many cars that fit so many different purposes. And you can see these people, you know, in social and stuff that have all these cars. And I'm not talking about, you know, YouTubers with flashy Lamborghinis. I'm just talking about average people with really nice collector cars, like the real Zuckerman, for example. You can see why you if you have the means, that you would end up with a lot of cars. You know what I mean?
For sure.
You can see it. And, you know, even in Porsche, you know, like I said, you know, I've been talking about the 912, as do the listeners of this podcast. The 996 Turbo is another one which I still have some attraction to that 996 Turbo. And also because, as you know, it's only one of the couple of 996 generation that doesn't have the IMS issue.
So why are you keen on that one?
I think it's really underpriced. I think I like the shape of it. I think it's really underpriced. I think it's really still undervalued. Even people still wanting, you know, 120, 130. I think there's one guy in Australia that's been trying to get 165 for months, but it's very low kilometers. But there's a grey one for sale at the moment for 99,000. It's got red interior. It has, I think, 100,000 kilometers, and it's 99 grand. I think that's a really good buy for 99 grand, even with 110 or whatever thousand kilometers it's got on it. And it's got a red interior, which is not everyone's taste. But in the Turbo, I kind of think in years to come, it kind of works. Maybe that's my problem being in Bahrain for so long. I'm starting to get used to full red interiors. So next I'll be speccing a burgundy car with a full red leather interior or something like that.
Go gold. 996 Turbo would be an amazing car. But again, it's probably more whether or not, is it different enough from your 997 in terms of the actual kind of experience?
That's the point. But see, the Carrera 4S, right? It's not like a childhood dream car or anything like that. But I remember looking at that car in Scuds in Willoughby and seeing it when it was out new. You know what I mean? When we lived nearby there, and Tash and I'd go for a walk or a run, and we'd go past the dealership. And I always thought that's a really nice car, especially from the rear. It always had a really good rear. But then you got the Carrera 4S, and that is almost a little bit too similar to the 997, right? I know it's a 4S, but it's probably too close. And my microphone is playing up today, so sorry for the noise in the background. And then you go to the cheap option, and that's a 986 Boxster.
986 Boxster, yep.
Yeah, the first generation. So you do the Magnus Walker thing and you try to get a car out of the first generation. So maybe you get a 996 Carrera, 98 model, full of problems but potential, or you get an early Boxster. Or you get an early Boxster. But how much is that going to cost you?
Early Boxster is pretty cheap. You see occasionally on Autohouse, they occasionally have 986 Boxsters kind of pop up, really low mileage and stuff like that. I've driven quite a few of those in the time as loan cars. My uncle kind of had a couple as well. My cousin had one, which is my uncle's son. And they're awesome cars, but I'm not quite sure if they've stood the test of time or not in terms of, don't know, I guess it just depends on your standards in terms of the kind of quality of the feel of the interior and everything. And I suspect even like right now, the driving experience wouldn't be as kind of sharp and by today's standards. I think it would feel quite floaty and possibly a little bit slow. And like don't get me wrong, like compared to, you know, an equivalent 3 Series or, you know, a Golf, like I'd much rather have an old Boxster over that. But like you've heard me talk about if and we're talking complete fantasy land at the moment, if I was to kind of get another car just for fun, I'd love a sort of more recent Spider, like the brand new GT4 Spider would be a brilliant car. And like, okay, so switch to me for a second. Like, why do I think of that one? It's like, well, because I think like the top down experience would be pretty amazing. It's sort of like a couple of generations more modern than my 997 GT3, so I think it would be significantly different. Yeah, for sure. Like you talked a little bit, obviously, when you're sort of thinking about this type of stuff, again, hypothetically, you think about the value of it, and I think probably it sounds like it's going to be made in low enough numbers to, not kind of completely tank money-wise. But yeah, so I reckon that would be a fun car. But
I love that car. I think I said last time I watched a couple of YouTube videos. I forget who it was. I think Matt Farah's one of them, and there was someone else. There was quite a few. But that Spider, that latest generation Spider, it's really, really good.
Yeah, looks great.
It's really, really good. And I would choose that over the GT4. I know that's, people probably go for the GT4, but I would take the Spider. I would take the Spider. Wow. If you had another car.
I was exactly about to say that. Depends on what else you've kind of got in the garage kind of thing. And I know this is just a topic of, chit-chat kind of thing. But if you kind of keep in mind that you've got your car in the garage, then I guess I would have thought that it's funny because, like, go back to your 997 as an example. Like, the 997 in terms of your car is quite practical. So you can kind of view it in that sort of way. It's like, oh, okay, so is your 997 your daily car and then you go and get like a really fun car, or is your 997 your fun car and if you needed a practical car to kind of take the kids to school in and all of that sort of stuff, which is more my situation, what else do you kind of stick next to it?
I think the 997 Carrera, that I have with the new Boxer Spider, I think that's quite a good combination. I think that's quite a good combination. I think if I didn't have the Carrera, I don't know, the Spider, I don't think you'd want to have a Spider and a GT3, would you? Not really. Not really. I'm not sure.
I would. But I'd go with 997 GT3 plus a new Spider. An old Spider, say like the equivalent, what is it, 987? That was before it was a
the model before.
One.
Yeah, the one model before.
I'm
that's quite
nice.
Nice.
Sure about that. But in Australia, they're still up over 100 and something grand, and they're very rare. They're a lot more rare than the GT4, so very hard to kind of come by. I reckon that'd be a great car, though.
I don't know. When I went on the configurator and spec'd out a new Boxer Spider, they work out quite expensive. I think they end up about, even with a couple of options, you're already at 230, 240 Australian dollars drive away. So I think it's quite a lot. It's quite a lot because they're going to come down. They'll drop down in price. Look at the last generation GT4. You know what I mean? So
what's that? That's at about
140 Australian dollars, 140,000 Australian dollars. So that's about 100.
Pretty good value.
What's that, about 100,000 US dollars? I'm not sure what they are in the US. So what's that, 70,000 pounds, 65,000 pounds?
Yeah, and there's a lot of them.
There is a lot of them, yeah. And a lot of them don't have the lightweight buckets either. It seems that a lot of people that bought that GT4 just got the standard comfort seats.
I think because when they first did all the deliveries of the first cars, I don't think you could get the lightweight buckets in them. Remember there was that shortage, I'm sure, like with the equivalent GT3s. I kept reading that, particularly in the States, even if you wanted them, you couldn't get them or it would delay your order.
I think you'd wait, though. I wouldn't take an order without them. After sitting in yours and hearing Andreas Prutinger talk about how comfortable they are, and that's what were the two main options that he was speaking on that podcast with? Was on Spike's Car Radio? Yeah. Spike's Car Radio. And the two main options he said, ceramic brakes and lightweight buckets.
Did he say ceramics? No, he did too.
Yep. He said ceramic brakes and lightweight buckets, and he said also don't get rid of the PCM. It makes no difference deleting the PCM. You don't save that much weight.
Oh, that's right.
And he said,
For a
make
day,
sure you
yeah.
have air conditioning. Don't delete the air conditioning. That's what he was talking about. Because some people actually want their GT3s without air conditioning. I don't know why you do that. Because he said the weight you save is nothing, and the weight you save by getting the lightweight buckets is much, much greater, and that's a better option. So,
Yeah.
but I think that's the problem with, and we've spoke about this, I think, in another previous episode, didn't we? But I think that's the problem with Porsche at the moment. When people go onto the configurator and people have to buy, when they want to buy a new Porsche, it's quite confusing now, don't you think? There is so many options. You know what I mean?
I don't actually spend much time on it.
If you go on
if
it
at all.
though, but there's so many options. There is so many options, Steve, and there's so many options that are tied to other things. You know what I mean? It's not, you know, some people may see it as being fun, but I think other people might see it as a little bit frustrating. You know what I mean? And then when you start speccing it out, you know, you're up to $30,000, $40,000 just in options. So it works out very expensive. So what would you
Different
choose?
world, though.
So
Like that's buying a brand new car, and
Yes.
I very rarely buy brand new cars. Like I'm a scrounger, and therefore kind of looking at sort of slightly used type things or like very used kind of things, hopefully with lower mileage. So I don't know. I think it's a completely different mindset. Where if you've got, you know, let's face it, if you're buying a brand new Porsche, then you're happy to spend in excess of like, I don't know, 160, 170, I guess, which is a very different kind of proposition to sort of thinking in your brain that you're going to spend, say, like $100,000 on a used Macan or something like that.
yeah, yeah. So what other brands? What are you thinking about? What other brands? I mean,
Well,
Mercedes-Benz
yeah,
comes to mind to me, and BMW comes to mind, and Ferrari comes to mind. But I think you should talk.
yeah, okay, cool. So, exactly. So, look, you use me as an example. Recently, you talked. I think in the previous couple of podcasts, I had a 1M alongside the GT3. That's when I was not married, and that was an amazing car. Such a cool car. That was supposedly my everyday runabout, more practical car, which it was, but it had tons of character, like in spades, just as much as a 911. So I can't glow more than that about a one, and I'm very sad that it's gone. I have to have one again one day. That was my only M car that I've had. But so, for argument's sake, say you need something a little bit more practical because my GT3 also has a roll cage in the back because it's a club sport, which means I've got no rear seats. And now that I've got a kid, I'm going to have to kind of ferry like kids, small people around. So we weighed it all up and we wound up for my wife getting a Macan Turbo. We would have been quite happy with the Macan, just a standard S. A GTS is actually bizarrely more expensive than a Turbo on the used market.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Yeah, so we wound up with a 2015 Turbo with 30-something thousand K on it because basically it was amazing value. Like we set a budget, and for $5,000 more than the set budget that Cindy sort of dictated to me, I went out and found a Turbo instead because it had all the options spec'd out.
But Macans are great, right? They're great because they have a better transmission than the Cayenne, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Much better transmission, correct? Because the Cayenne doesn't have PDK, right? It just has normal automatic, correct? I think.
I'm not sure.
I don't think the Cayenne.
Look into a Cayenne.
I don't think the Cayenne has double clutch. I don't think it has the PDK. From my memory,
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about them, but the Macan always gets really good reviews. People always say it's a great drive and it's one of the best, right? It's one of the best that size sort of SUVs.
I probably sound like I'm a bit indifferent to it, but I think I'm probably slightly, I don't know, I've got a slightly strange point of view, which is, so like for our purposes, that's Cindy's car. And as long as she's happy and I get to keep my car, then she can have whatever she wants and I'm completely happy.
But it looks good.
I sound so spoiled. Look, yeah, so don't get me wrong, I like driving it, I drive it quite a lot. But it's hard to not feel like it's a little bit boring.
Yeah, but you know what? To a lot of people listening, I'm sure they're going, what is wrong with you? That is a perfect two-car Porsche garage. You've got a 997
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
GT3 and you've got a Macan Turbo. Sure, it's not the latest one and whatever, but it's still, it doesn't matter because the model you have or the new model, they both look good. There's very little difference really, except in the dash. But as a as a duo, that's a great duo, Steve. You know, it really is.
Yeah,
It's a really good duo. And I know what you
don't get me wrong.
but I know what you said when you went on the mountain roads and you went on the twisty roads. The Macan just didn't live up to what you had in your head, I guess, because you're so used to the GT3. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's because you get so spoilt. Like when with the GT3 with the kind of interesting exhaust and all of that sort of stuff, the experience is so kind of there's so much kind of going on in it. You jump into any other car and it feels really boring. And that, like, I know that's partly the point because you want your other car, in this particular instance, you probably want it to be a lot more comfortable and stuff like that. And for that, then you lose some of the engagement. But I'll use a different reference point. So say it wasn't a Macan Turbo, and I still stand by this. If we didn't get a turbo, then, and it was more up to me. So, like, to be honest, Cindy really wanted an SUV because she likes the feeling of sitting up high. I would have potentially opted for something more like an old AMG C63. So my mum drives one. My 70-year-old mum poodles around in a 6.2 litre V8.
What model? What year is that again? I forget. What model year was that? 2008?
2010.
Okay.
You want to get one that's 2010 onwards because they've got like a funny issue in the head bolts, I think it is.
Right.
So I drive that car regularly. I sort of borrow it and sort of poodle around in that. And see, by comparison, I don't see that as being any less practical than the Macan in terms of physical space, like to kind of put kids' seat stuff in the boot, you know, carry pot plants around or you're shopping or whatever else. And that whole experience is dominated by that engine, and it's a great engine. That thing sounds so good. So
it's definitely not a huge car.
Have one of those.
But it's not a huge car, the Macan, is it? It's not that big. The back seats are not that big. I sat in one in Bahrain at the Porsche dealer, and I was quite surprised how tight it was, actually.
It's very deceptive. I think you look at them on the outside and you kind of think, like, and this applies not just to Macans, but most of the sort of smaller SUVs, like sort of sub-Cayenne size. But I really don't think that it's that much bigger than, say, like a Golf. In terms of the actual kind of practical size of the boot and the rear seats. We can't fit that much stuff in our boot.
Well, when I saw it, I went to Porsche in Bahrain and I sat in the Macan first. And I thought, oh, it feels good in the front seats. It felt fantastic. Like there's plenty of room. You know, the dash is well laid out. You know, it's typical Porsche. Everything feels like it's in the right spot. Then you sit in the back and it's a bit small. Then you open the back and it's like, wow, this is not very big. And maybe I'm basing it on the Audi Avant that I used to have. It just didn't feel like it was a lot of space there. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm misled. But then unfortunately, as soon as I sat in the Macan, I sat in a Panamera, a base Panamera. Mm-hmm. And then you sit in that and it's just like, there's just so much room. You know what I mean?
So use that as an example too. I considered, and I tried to talk Cindy into, that would have been like the sort of revised second generation Panamera as an option. I remember there was one that kind of popped up that had the V8. I think it was a GTS. It had really low Ks. It was in like a small dealership, and I think they just wanted just over, I think it was about 110 or 115 Aussie dollars for it, and that was more than what we paid for the Macan. And in the end, probably a decent amount more. But I reckon that would have been more practical. And now it's been the kind of focus to me more than Cindy. I reckon I would have kind of gotten maybe more enjoyment out of it because of the V8 as such. I reckon the driving experience would be amazing. The looks are very polarizing. I love the look of the new ones. The old ones, I think you kind of have to get used to, but I reckon it's one of those cars where you go, oh, it's a bit ugly, but you you love it to bits because the ugliness you conveniently morph into kind of personality or character kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think they're ugly. I mean, I see a lot of them now because there are a lot in Bahrain. They're very, very popular. They're
The older
very
ones or the new ones?
both. Both. There's a lot of old ones. There's a lot of the previous generation. There's a lot of new ones. There's a lot around basically. There's quite a few. You see a lot of GTS. GTS. I mean, they're not that expensive used, but then you have the problem with I think the maintenance on the Panamera is a bit scary, and then there's always those stories about the air suspension and trying to get the air suspension fixed, and maybe that's just a Middle East thing, but apparently the cost of servicing that car in the Middle East is really, really expensive. And at one stage there, I was kind of keen on the Panamera, as you know, and the GTS is more appealing, but I think you would have to get one without air suspension. In fact, some ads, when they're advertising the Panamera in Bahrain, they say it doesn't have air suspension. Like they actually put it in the ad, which, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of a bit of a worry. It is kind of a bit of a worry, but I don't know if that's true. But
right.
I've just read stuff here and there.
No idea. I've got air suspension in the Macan.
But is that
supposedly one of the desirable sort of options in terms of the ride comfort is better. I've read a few little things like, but I think the bits that I read about it when I looked it all up was that air suspension is very common in like lots of cars these days. Mercs have them, Audis have them. So obviously it's a more complicated kind of component. So if it does crap out, then for sure you're probably up for a bigger bill. I don't think with Macan Turbos, a lot of them kind of come with the air suspension.
Yeah.
But
well, if you have any troubles with it, I just read the Panamera, maybe the weight of it. I don't know. I just thought there was issues with it. Maybe it's an earlier model. Maybe it's not maybe it's like the earlier ones. But it was GTS. The Panameras are great. I mean, I still think you got the great combination. I think GT3 and the Macan's a great combination. But then again, I think that your 1M, the 1M and the GT3 together is also, I thought, a really good combination. You know what I mean? Like, if you want a really cool pairing, you want two drivers' cars. But once again, if you need the space, Steve, as you know, the 1M didn't have any space in the back seats either.
No, I reckon
not
it
much,
did.
Right?
If I still had that car, which got traded in for an engagement ring, it doesn't have. It's only a two-door, so accessing the back seats is a little bit harder. And yes, okay, for sure, it's not got as much space as a Macan, but I would just sort of say if anybody's kind of looking at a second practical kind of car to facilitate your family, Macans and Tiguan's and Q5s, Mercedes, what is it, GL something or others, they're just not as roomy as you think that they are. Particularly once you put you fold up your stroller and you stick that in the boot, and there's no space left.
It's all a marketing ploy.
Yeah, and you stick your rear-facing baby seat in the back of the car, and you've got to push the front seat so forward that you probably couldn't sit in it. Cindy can squeeze in. I can just fit in it, but
no, I found it really small in the Macan, but I found it really small as well in the as you know, my other mate, the BMW M2 that he has. When I got a lift in that when I was back at Christmas, I found that really tight in the back. That is just typical BMW. They're always really small in the back seat. But that M2 felt like there was no room at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I quite like the M2. I actually quite like the M2 competitions. Do you like the M2 competitions?
Yeah, my uncle's got the first gen M2, and so he bought that. I think I still had. Did I have my 1M at the time that he took delivery of his? I don't think we crossed over, but it was really fresh in my head. And that was a still is very nice car. But if I had the choice, I think I'd save my money and I'd go for a 1M, just for the kind of character. Again, it's a bit more it's a little bit more raw. The sort of noise that it makes is a bit more interesting. The way that it looks, the handling is a lot more interesting in a 1M than an M2.
And I think you're. I think most people that have driven them say the same. I've heard that from other people online that have driven them, both of them, and they say the 1M is still a better car. It's got a better steering feel, than the M2.
Also,
Apparently.
There's something about a 1M where it holds its value, it holds its value really well because of the rarity of it.
Yeah.
Since I sold mine, if I still had it, it would still be worth what I paid for it. I think I made $500 on it when I sold it.
And this is the thing, though.
Yeah.
Go on.
It's still really, really sought after. I can absolutely understand why. But then you look at the equivalent 1M in Australian dollars. I think you probably spent maybe about 110, 120 on your M2 brand new, and possibly three and a bit years later, I think it's worth maybe less than half of that or about half of that. So it's depreciated like a normal car. Whereas if in the day you had spec'd like a brand new 1M, you were one of the lucky owners and you paid your $100,000 for it, depending on the condition, you've dropped maybe $20,000 on it. 20, 30 grand tops, depending on how much you've used it.
I keep thinking the 1M and the M2, whichever your preference, I think they go really well with a 911. I think that's it's a good matchup. It feels like a good, bit of variety. You know what I mean? There's a bit of variety there, and I think it works, especially if you've got a GT3 like you have and you have one of those. I think it works really, really well. And if you don't need a huge car, it's still a fun car to have. It's still got 4 seats. It's got more room in the back than a 911. It's got seats compared to the GT3, which doesn't have any rear seats. So I think it's quite a good option. I still like the idea, though. I still really do like the idea of like a 997.1 GT3 like yours, or 0.2, I guess, and an air-cooled 911. You know what I mean? I still think a lot of people always think that they want a 997, whether it be a GT3 or a Carrera or Carrera S, and then they want an air-cooled. And I think that's the hardest bit at the moment, is actually getting an air-cooled or finding an air-cooled that hasn't gone too crazy with value, that, like you said, is not going to cost you an arm and a leg to keep and to service for the few kilometers or few miles you're doing it each year. And which one is that? And that's what I was saying. I still think that the money you put into it, the 912, is still going to cost you less. In my head, just from what I've read, and I've only just started reading, right? But you're getting a reasonably slow car, right? So it's about the experience, which I've talked about before. But you can switch out the engine if you wanted to into a Polo Motors engine, which comes from the US, which is what Rod Emery uses in his 356s. He uses a Polo motor, I think. So you can up the horsepower. There's a lot of people in the US, but like I said before, but there's not a lot of people, I don't think, in Australia that do it. So I think in the US you have a lot more options if you want to not make it a matching numbers and you want to start playing with it. But then again...
So what sort of money do you need to get into something like that? Like all in, like how I used that example of, I don't know, I just made it up, like 120 grand, to buy the car, to
I read that,
have it in the shape that you want it to be just for the first year. Like what sort of money? You
could buy, if you go to Beverly Hills Car Club, which is another site that I go to, and he gets a lot of old Porsches, and some are like, some aren't in great condition or whatever. I think, I'm guessing he's quite reputable. I don't know much about the history of the company, but I just remember in the UK, I keep seeing old 912s and 911s with Beverly Hills Car Club stickers, and then I just did a search for it and the site came up, so that's how I found it. But you can get 912s and you get 911s as well if you have a look at his site. But you get 912s, you can get some for 29,000 US, and I think the highest price one I saw in his site was 49,000 US, but that was an early 65 model 3-dial in Irish green 912. So that was like the sought after color, a rarer one because it's 3-dial only, and it was painted dial. So the back of the dials is painted the body color of the car, so it doesn't have the weave pattern and it doesn't have the 5 dials. And that was 50. But I guess if you lived in the US, I guess you buy one for 30. You take it to, say, Polo Motors and get an engine put in. I think his engines are somewhere around $25,000 US.
Yikes.
But then if you do body work and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So I suppose if you wanted to kit it out, I remember, I think someone said that if you want a Rod Emery Porsche, like the Outlaw 356 that he does, or one of his cars, you have to wait about a year. But I think there's somewhere in excess of like 400,000 or 300,000 or 400,000. A Rod Emery 356 Outlaw, I think, sold on Bring a Trailer not that long ago for $500,000, and it was a 98. So this is not matching numbers, you know, like he does it for everything. So, but I don't know. I guess and then someone said that the Keen Safari, the Safari 911s, which Matt Farah has, which is based on you get an 87 Carrera donor car or a Carrera donor car. I don't know how many he's made Keen Safari. I think it's only like a dozen or something. I think he's only up to like 12. Yeah. Handful, right? But to get the Keen Safari conversion is 150,000.
Yep.
150,000 on top of your car. So you literally, I mean, I guess you can get an 87 Carrera in the US that is not perfect, right? Maybe you can get it for around 50,000. Maybe, I don't know, 50,000 for just like an ordinary one. So you're up to $200,000 for a Safari 911. That seems a lot to me.
So you're talking about a shitload of money. So kind of going back to the original kind of just basic question was with, say, like a 912, if you're up for, I'm still making it up, like 100 odd grand, I suppose that's... you can't get yourself into a 964 for the equivalent money, can you?
Well, this was a question I was going to ask you, and I actually heard this question being asked on a podcast the other day. I won't say which one. It's the obvious one that I always listen to, one of the two. If you bought a 964, would you pick a Carrera 2 or would you pick a Carrera 4? Now, not just based on the driving experience, but also on the cost of running the car, the issues. So you say a 2 as well. So it's not just it's not just the purest thing about the 2 is better. It's the fact that the 964 has... Is it that the four-wheel drive system on the 964, because it was one of the first ones, or the first four-wheel drive system that Porsche did, so therefore it has some issues? Is that correct? I didn't know about this, so that's why I'm asking you.
So I owned mine a long time ago. I never had any sort of issues with it, but I think it's probably more, it does actually relate a lot to the experience. It feels significantly different. A C4 versus a C2 does feel significantly different in terms of the way that it drives. It's a lot more kind of understeery.
What's the ratio? Sorry, Steve. What's the ratio between the front and rear wheels? Do you know on a 964?
Drive.
Carrera 4?
I can't remember. I actually can't remember.
30-70 or something?
It's not. I have no idea. It's not like driving, say, like a Quattro, like the equivalent sort of Audi of the time, or a Subaru. It still feels a lot more characterful, like a 911. So it feels a lot more rear-wheel drive biased kind of thing. But it does sort of, in that sort of era of car, change the kind of experience a little bit. So if you sort of said to me right now that you were on the market for a 964, what would you do? It's like, like I would aim for a C2. If you couldn't find one and an immaculate C4 came up, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I think the C2 is more of an interesting experience, less likely to kind of have issues with it when it does, because of the vintage of it now. It's less likely to have kind of issues with it. And value-wise, the C2 will be more desirable than the C4. I think that changes once you start getting into four-wheel drive 997s and 991s and 2s and stuff like that. Then I think the difference between a C4 and a C2 is less obvious kind of thing. So it probably doesn't become as polarizing. But in a 964, I'd go a C2.
The C2s obviously get a lot more money as well. If you see them, and not as many come up in manual. Like they're quite rare coming up, aren't they?
They're definitely the sought after one.
It's funny, our last podcast we were talking about wheels, and you're talking about how great those Speedline wheels were. I was going to send you a link. There's a Carrera 4 for sale on Bring a Trailer. It used to be owned by the CEO of Porsche America,
You did send it to me, the red one.
Did I send it to you? Yeah, it's one of those cars
the
in
red
the
one.
ad. It's one of those cars in the ad where all the red cars are all in a circle, and all the dealers apparently in North America or dealers around the world went to Porsche to pick up these cars, and they were like factory delivery cars. But the Speedline wheels are nice, huh?
Yeah, they're cool.
Like
they're
it looks
so
good
cool,
on that one. When I saw them, I thought, man, I see what you. And I thought about that when I looked at them. But even in that Guards Red with those Speedline wheels, it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. But so you did right, actually. Like, to go alongside a 997 in your garage. I'd love to have an air cooled Porsche in there. Whether it was a 964, 993, slightly older than that. I don't have, again, a great deal of experience, but I'm assuming like a 70s or 80s Carrera would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. What is it? The 70? Is it 72? I think they say there's a sweet spot, right? Is it 71? 71 Carrera. 71 Carrera apparently is one, isn't it? Or 70 or 71 Carrera. And then the 87, 88 Carrera, which is like the one your uncle owned, wasn't it? G50 gearbox. And then, of course, the 964 Carrera 2 and the 993 Carrera 2. 993 Carrera 2s in Australia, I'm not sure about the rest of the world, seem to be still getting less money than a 964 Carrera 2. There's one with about 200,000 kilometers for sale at the moment in Kiama in Australia for 120,000. Black one with tan interior, which is actually quite a nice. It looks like it's been looked after, and it's got 200,000 kilometers on it. So that's quite nice. I mean, I do.
You still got to have like 120, 130 plus to kind of do any of this, don't you?
But when you find, see the prices of 912s, if you look in the UK or Europe, they're expensive. They're hitting 40,000, 50,000 pounds for one that's had a little bit of work to it. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the 912s, they have rusty floors and they have problems with the fuel tank. You know, so you want ones that have had a new fuel tank put in. You want ones that had the floors, repaired, etc. But you're looking at and when you get that landed, you're actually up to that $120,000 mark. And I think that's the problem with the 912. I mean, it's an experience. It's a classic Porsche. It's still cheaper than getting a 67 911, you know what I mean? Or a 69 911, depending if you want the long wheelbase, which is a 69 model. But then again, you're getting close to the 993 price, and as a driving experience and as something that's still a little bit more modern, will you get more out of the 993? Maybe you will. And you've owned a 993, and I think...
If it was me, then I would sort of say, yeah. If that was the case, then something like the sort of 912 thing that you're talking about, that probably would be more like my fourth, fifth car in the garage, not my second. We'll try to get to that point, but anyway.
That's what I'm thinking, isn't it? That's what it is, isn't it? If you have, a 997 Carrera GT3, you have a 993 or 964 Carrera 2.
Yep.
And then you get the 912, which is a slow experience, sort of car, experience sort of Porsche. And that's kind of the way you would go. Because a 964, 993 is probably still a better driving experience than a 912.
We didn't cover the other obvious car that I suppose most enthusiasts would kind of cover, which is an M3 of any kind of sort.
Old BMWs. Old BMWs in general, don't you think? I kind of miss the market on old BMWs. Have you missed it? Because I didn't realize that it's gone so crazy. I didn't actually realize.
I don't follow it.
I don't follow it either. I've just looked at a few used prices recently, and I saw that auction, like I said, on Bring a Trailer earlier. But, the, what is it, the 2000 model M5? I know that...
the V8?
Yeah, the 2000 model M5 car. Apparently is a really, really good car if you get one in manual.
E39.
Yeah, E39, 2000 model M5. But I don't know, I looked on the Australian side. I didn't look on the UK side. There was one available. That was it. And then the M3, like we know, the M3 from 2002, is it? What's that model? E39?
E46?
E46
That's
M3.
the sought after one, yeah.
Yeah, so the manual, and I sent you that white one during the week.
You did. My cousin had one of those. That was a brilliant car. I had a kind of little tinker and tootle in those in that car a few times, and they look really great. The sound of the engine is really nice, very similar. That sort of inline six is similar to the 1M that I had, although the 1M's got a turbo. My uncle then got the E92, the V8, the first V8, and the first and only V8 M3, which was quite nice as well. I think that engine has sort of a few longevity issues, but it sounds amazing. I'm not quite sure about the new ones.
But that's the era. Yeah, I was going to say that's the era of BMW that you want to buy into, right? Because current generation, they kind of lost their way. Like I think is the new M3 or M4 pictures of them, and they're not very popular, right? They're kind of gone a little bit odd. They've lost their way a little bit.
But even the one that's just about to be superseded, the styling of it looks great. Very, very conflicting kind of reviews when it first came out in terms of the engine sort of performance. Like it's a turbo and it sort of sounds like it's a bit spiky and it's plenty powerful, but it just sort of sounded like it's not the same old kind of sort of BMW way of doing things.
But I think the old M3, what is it? E39, is it? E40?
Yep. The M3?
The M3 is which one? I don't know the model.
The E46.
E46 M3, and then the M5 from 2000. I think they complement the Porsche very well, whether it be you've got a standard or whatever. That's a really good, I think that'd be a great one to have in your garage alongside it.
I suspect the maintenance on both of those would be relatively high as well.
Be high, yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. But older BMWs are still better than the new ones. I wouldn't get a new one, that's for sure. We didn't say Ferrari. We didn't say Ferrari as a second to the Porsche. We didn't think a Ferrari would work.
I don't know. My uncle, who I keep referring to, is a German kind of car sort of guy. Has been for a very long time. He got out of his. What did he have? He had a 997.2 Carrera 4. He had that similar time to when I picked up my GT3, and then he switched teams. He got rid of that and he got himself into a F430 with the F1 transmission, so the auto or the automated kind of transmission.
Has he had trouble with that transmission?
No, you have trouble with the clutch. The clutch wears really quickly in those things. He's got like a slight incline on his driveway and he has to back it out, and his independent mechanic could pick it and just sort of said, you're better off rolling your car in reverse, like down your driveway, because reversing the car out is wearing the clutch. Like they've got all the tools to kind of measure it. And
okay.
A clutch change in a Ferrari is not a cheap exercise.
Yeah.
So look, he loves that car. I've driven it twice, I think, and I'd love to actually go back and have another sort of tinkle, but
he's owned that for quite some time, right? He bought that a long time ago. That was over 5 years ago.
After my GT3.
Over 5 years ago,
I've had my GT3 6 years, so I reckon he's had it for maybe 4 or 5 years, yeah.
So how did you find, just quickly, we won't get into it too deeply, but how did you find driving the F430 to the GT3?
Prefer the GT3.
But what was the main? What was the main difference though? Did you feel that the Ferrari felt heavier? Did the Ferrari feel more planted? Did the GT3 feel more planted?
I think the basic kind of reason why I say that was I didn't really enjoy the whole the automatic transmission. Like you're using the paddles, and it's a different way to like a double clutch kind of gearbox because you've got to drive it more like a manual. But I think just the notion of not using, like rowing through the gears with your left hand in a right-hand drive car, it just isn't nearly as much fun. The engine does sound amazing in that F430, but my uncle's car was standard. My car's got the exhaust on it. I just sort of found the GT3 to be actually more interesting, to be perfectly honest.
So he hasn't put an exhaust on it? Your uncle has not put an
He doesn't mod his cars.
Really?
My uncle doesn't tinker. Yeah.
Wow, because you can get great exhaust for that Ferrari.
Yeah, first thing I do is put one of those Capristo exhausts.
Yeah, I was going to say the Capristo, yeah. That's the name. That was what I was trying to think of. I always think Tubi is the name, but it's Capristo, right?
Yeah, it's a cool car. But the other thing I think with that experience, like I said, I've only been in it once or twice, but everybody looks at you in a Ferrari, like, and it's black, so it's not like it's bright red or bright yellow, but because it's quite loud on the outside, his is a Spider as well. Maybe that's part of the reason why. But you can't stop in traffic and not have everybody just sort of looking at you and all of that sort of stuff. So,
See, no one looks at me in my car at all. No one even takes a second glance.
I don't reckon that many people look at GT3 as well, to be perfectly honest.
Porsche's too common. Porsche is too common. I mean, I like the F430 that your uncle's got, but I prefer I prefer the look of the 458 Italia personally. But
Yeah, same.
you know, if you were going to buy a Ferrari, 488 I don't really like. I like the L612 Scagaletti or whatever it is. One of those came up at Classic Throttle Shop in Sydney in Le Mans blue, the best color in my eyes, and it came up with a manual transmission, and it sold like almost straight away, and it was only early 200,000 Australian dollars, and that was probably the best 612 you would see anywhere in the world. I reckon that was like immaculate. It had no miles on it. It was tan interior, Le Mans blue. It was beautiful. It's really beautiful.
I am really curious as to what the ownership experience is truly like. I think like probably two of the defining things are that you probably can't drive that much if you're worried about value. Like I think if you're going to drive a heap, then it'll tip in value so badly. And I sort of also wonder like truly what the maintenance is like, because you know. We're car enthusiasts and stuff, and we talk about the maintenance that we spend on Porsche. But I think if you're really truly honest about it, again, depending on your standards, you can sink quite a bit of maintenance money into a Porsche. So I can't imagine what it's like if you're fussy and you own a Ferrari.
This is why I think if you're getting a Ferrari, you buy a new one, you get the 7 years warranty, 7 years service that Ferrari now provides you. You know what I mean? I think that's the clever thing to do, right? If you're buying something like that, you have to put the money into it and you have to drive it. Like you said, you can't be too fussed about it, which is why I kind of appreciate people in London when you see it, when you're around areas like Chelsea and Mayfair and stuff like that, the more affluent areas, and you see them parked in the street. Like you see these cars parked in the street. Like occasionally you see a Bugatti just parked on the street. You know what I mean? Like it's obviously been parked there overnight. Like it's crazy. And you see Ferraris all the time. Porsches are just parked, you know what I mean? Because they don't have car parking in a lot of those Holland Hills and those places. They just park on the street. But I read something the other day, or I heard something. I forget what it was. I don't know if it was on YouTube or it was an article, that they reckon the 812 is one of the best cars. The 812 is really, really fantastic. 812 Superfast is apparently the best Ferrari.
Yeah.
So,
or even the new one. I can't remember what the Tributo is. It.
Oh yeah.
Chris Harris was raving about that on Instagram.
But they say that Tributo,
a bit of banter between him and Preuninger about it.
Yeah, but didn't they say it's only just like a facelifted 488? It's basically a 488 facelifted with a new name.
Yeah. I
didn't realize that. I thought it was a completely new model.
Well, I don't follow it. There's another, because there's two. There's an SF something or other, which is sort of like their hybrid as well, which kind of looks pretty cool. But Ferraris are another world.
I think the hardest part about this is you start on a topic like this and you start talking about it, and it's just you and I talking about it now. But you see, you can't come to really any conclusion because there are a lot of options. You know what I mean? There's things that go better with the Porsche. Like I said, I think BMWs complement the Porsche, especially older BMWs, or even the 1M like you had, which is, 8 years old now when it came out in 2012, right? 2011, the 1M.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I think older BMWs work well. Ferrari, I think a Ferrari does kind of complement a Porsche, but I don't think it's something you would have as a second car. If you had a GT3, I don't think you'd have a 430 or a 458 or a 488 Ferrari to go alongside it. I think you'd have to have a third car, which is why when you only have two cars makes it really, really difficult. And I think you've got, for family-wise, I think you've got the perfect combination because you have the GT3, you have the Macan. They're both cool cars. They both have different purposes and they both suit what's needed. You know what I mean? And I think it works. It works really well. And they're the same color, which is even better. So,
which is terrible. What must the neighbors think of us? It's like, oh, who are those wankers?
Anyway. Like I said, I think I've run out of breath. I think that the travel's getting to me. I'm starting to feel like weak at the knees. I think I'm tired.
Oh, good, mate. Jet lag. Wrap it up.
I don't know about jet lag.
Call it a
It's only a 7-hour flight, but I just think I think it's just knocked me around today. Hopefully this recording is okay. Like Steve can't actually. I just want to let everyone know who's listening to this because they won't see a video of this. But I'm actually talking to Steve. He can't see my face because I've got this new microphone stand, and the microphone is literally covering my face, so that I don't have to lean over to the microphone. But what I've started to do, Steve, which I think I'm going to see in this recording, is I keep moving off the range of the microphone. These microphones are so temperamental if you don't speak directly into them. Maybe I should just have the little lapel mic like you've got and it'd be a lot easier.
The lapel mic's good, but it doesn't counter the fact when you're a mumbler and a low talker, so...
But I think this is okay today because, I don't know, my internet's better here than Bahrain. And I think this is a Zoom call again, so... people who are listening, if you think the quality is not so great, it's because these calls I'm doing with Steve, this series we're doing together, continuing together, it's through Zoom because we're in different locations. And until we work out something that sounds better, I think at the moment I think Zoom's still the best option for us. Don't you, Steve?
Yeah, it's fine. It's all good. When are
What else? Anything else? Anything else you want to share?
I was going to ask you.
What else did you buy? Have you bought anything else?
No. Got no money.
Okay, so are you going to post those pictures on your Instagram of your door pulls and your gear knob and your console lid so people can see it? Because people keep asking me to see this.
No, I'm not. I'll send it to you and you can post stuff if you want.
Okay.
If people really want to know, I'm desperately trying not to kind of build a social profile. Not that people really want to follow me anyway. So,
but they will now after this podcast.
There's nothing to see.
All right. I think that's it for today. We done? We're done.
I was going to ask you, when are you doing some more YouTube videos? I haven't seen you kind of...
Haven't I done any?
In a while.
I don't know. I put the podcast up. Some people tell me that they'd like to see my face and they want me to start doing videos again. I don't know about that. I don't know. I just don't think I have... I might do a watch video. I was going to go to Rolex in Bahrain before I left, but I was strong and I didn't go even though I wanted to go because I think they've got a lot of watches there and I think I could have actually got something.
Oh, okay.
Because there are no tourists in Bahrain, so there's no one buying watches there. But now I'm in London.
Will that be the same in London?
Well, this is not really a watch podcast, but what I'm going to do, Stephen, I told you, I'm going to go and have a look for the green Tudor Harrods. I'm going to see if I can get on the wait list for that because it's only a relatively cheap, I'll say relatively cheap watch compared to a Rolex. It's like £3,000 or something. I was thinking about the 58, whatever you call it. Yeah, the blue one. Tasha hates it. My wife hates it. Yeah, Tasha thinks it's boring. She doesn't like the look of it at all. Doesn't like the blue. She said it looks too schoolboy blue. So I might put that one on hold. I like the green one. I still want to get
Tasha's great. Your wife's great.
I still want to get a blackface. I still want to get a blackface Explorer 2. I would I'm going to see if I can get one in London. I'm going to ask and see if there's anything around. I'm just going to test the waters at Watches of Switzerland here in Boucherie. I'm going to just test the waters. I got some Rolex books. I posted the picture on my Instagram. I got some Rolex magazines that I bought. They're a free magazine, but I decided I wanted to pay, £30 for a magazine, so I bought them on eBay.
Okay, that's weird.
Because you can't get them anymore. I tried to get some and I can't get them, so people are reselling them, so I bought it. Not Porsche related. I did buy something Porsche related. I bought the new Type 7 book. I bought the Type 7 book by your friend Ted Gushu.
Uh-huh.
But I haven't opened it yet.
Sarcasm there from Michael because he's probably got the job that we all want, but I'm not quite sure.
If everyone doesn't know what Type 7 is, and I don't know, most people should know what it is, right? It's basically Porsche's Instagram site done by Ted Gushu, correct? Porsche, what is it, lifestyle sort of thing. So it's not just Porsche cars, it's architecture and other things, but it literally is Porsche's, it's controlled by Porsche.
It's aimed at younger people than us, but it's trying to kind of bait people into the brand by showing them sort of more interesting kind of cultural things. And then every fourth post relates to Porsches, but it's not actually sort of like a proper enthusiast kind of channel. It's very interesting, and aesthetically, it's quite amazing.
I think
highly curated.
I think some of the posts, I don't think it's that curated. I don't want to be hard on it because I like it, but I heard him talk, and I don't think what he talks of how it is actually how it is. I think it is how a lot of other Instagram pages are like, and I think he makes it out like it isn't, and I think it actually is, because they still repost other people's pictures. They still do what I do on PorscheCooled Instagram. You know what I mean? And now the book that I bought, and I bought it basically for a bit of research just to see what they have, because I am kind of interested in the production of books, because, you know, books, as you know, you can get them printed quite cheaply in Malaysia and China. They don't cost that much. And people seem to want printed material in books and magazines at the moment. So I actually bought it just to see how it is, because basically it's just the Instagram post in a book. I think that's all it is.
You haven't bought that Triple O book periodical thing, have you?
No, I haven't, but I'm tempted to.
That looks amazing. It's just very expensive, and to have it sent to Australia, like I'd love to get my hands on one of those and have a look at it. But
well, you can get the special edition one, right? It comes in different colored boxes, like metal boxes and stuff. Like that's expensive, but I think he's done a really good job. That guy, I can't remember his name. But I think I think even Duck and Whale in Australia, that as a magazine, I think he's done quite well too, because it's circulated worldwide and people enjoy it. So it's, the Triple O is a different type of thing. It's a lot more expensive.
Yep.
And then there's Curves as well, the Curves magazine. Curves book, isn't it?
I've not seen that one.
Is it Curves? I think it's called Curves. And what's the other one? There's one more, isn't there? But Triple O's the one to get, yeah. Whatever you call it, that's the one to get.
Yeah.
What did I buy? Oh, I did buy something else, and it is kind of Porsche related. I bought the first issue of Hodinkee magazine, because they've been out of stock for 2 years, and I got an email last night saying it's back in stock. They've reprinted it. And the reason why I bought it is because it has the Porsche 1965 in it, which is obviously, what's the Hodinkee guy? It's obviously his car, because he has that 90s.
Ben Clymer?
Ben Clymer. I think he has a 1965 Porsche 911, has a kind of interesting heritage, I think, as well. He's got that car. Right. I think that's what's in the magazine, because it's the very first issue. It's got Daytona on the cover, which is good. And it also talks about Sea Dweller, which I own one, the red Sea Dweller. So I don't know if it's talking about the red one, but it's the Sea Dweller. So I just bought one of the copies. It's like Triple O that you were saying, Steve. I haven't bought the Hodinkee magazine before, or book, or whatever it is. So I don't know what it's like. So I thought I'll buy one. If I like it, then I might buy the other ones that are available still. Yeah. Because I think it talks
expensive hobbies, mate.
Yeah,
very expensive hobbies.
All right, I'm going to let Steve go. He's got things to do. He's probably going to go back to sleep because he's been up since 2:30 in the morning. But that's about it. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Steve.
All good. Cool.
We'll talk to you again very, very soon in the next podcast on all your major podcast platforms.
What? No goodbye.
All right. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.